from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Once again, welcome to the North Idaho College Public Forum, and as we open today's program and we're entering the holidays, I would like, on behalf of our staff, to wish everyone a very good season and a look at 1994 with hopefully great happiness for you in the coming year. As we move through a time when many people are vacationing and having fun, we thought it was very appropriate to deal with a travelogue or a tour. And I know from past programs that our viewers have always responded with great enjoyment to do that. We're going to do this a little bit different. Oftentimes we are interviewing people after they return from a tour somewhere in the world, and we want to give you the opportunity to hear about one that's going to take place in the summer of 1994, and that you could even be a part of this if you would like to do so. I'm very pleased to welcome to our program three of my colleagues on the faculty at North Idaho College. To my far left is Mr. Jim McLeod, who is a member of the faculty, as I've indicated, at North Idaho College. He's in the Department of English and has done many tours in the past and has been on this program on a number of occasions on different subjects, both as a guest and as a panel member. Jim, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tony.
And secondly, I'm very pleased also to welcome to the program Judy Sildy, who is in the Department of History and Humanities and has been on the faculty with us for a number of years, and she too has great experience in tours, both with North Idaho College and separate from this institution in the past. And Judy, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the program.
Thanks, Tony.
And our third guest also on the faculty is Lloyd Marsh, who again has been on the program, like our other two guests, on a number of occasions. And he too has been involved in a tour in the past and is going to be on this tour that we're about to talk about. And as always, we're happy to welcome Lloyd to the program.
Thanks, Tony.
And I have not yet introduced what kind of tour we're talking about. This tour is to Turkey and parts of Greece, but basically to Turkey. As I indicated, it will come up in the summer of 1994. You're in for a real treat today. Not only are we going to talk about the experience of our guest in hosting these tours, but we're also going to give you some video, and you'll feel like you have been there already, and hopefully then you would like to continue that in a more detailed way. I'm going to start with my first question, is to have the three of you to tell us a little bit more about your background than I have given about tours that you've done in the past. And Jim, I think we shall start with you.
Thanks, Tony. Well, of course, I'm Scottish by origin, and so I actually began touring my touring career with North Idaho College by leading tours to Scotland in 1977. We led a number of them here at the college for 4 or 5 years, and we didn't get interested in the Mediterranean until a little bit later, and I think I'm going to let my wife talk about exactly how that came about.
Okay, Judy.
Well, I think it's fair to say we've been interested in the Mediterranean for years. I know I had been ever since I was a little kid. But the first tour that we led for NIC and for the community was 4 years ago in 1990. Before that time, Jim and I had traveled extensively in the area. As a matter of fact, he and I were married in Greece in 1982, so it's a long-standing interest. But we had a terrific experience with leading our first tour of this particular sort 4 years ago, so we look forward to an even better one.
Well, I certainly would add that knowing you a long time, that you're certainly very professional and experienced in this process. And I've talked to some of the people who've toured with you, and they've had nothing but great comments to make about how very, very educational it is. Now, I do want to add a footnote here and apologize to Jim McLeod. I know when they put up the credits, they misspell your name. Being Scottish myself, we'll inform our viewers it's capital M-C, capital L-E-O-D, and not the extra C. Some of the Scottish fans watching may want
The clan will descend here.
They will, right. Lloyd, may we go to you and talk to you about, I know that you were involved with our other two guests in the summer of 1990. Would you tell us about that too?
Right. Well, it was just our common love for Greece. I think I had the opportunity after retiring from the Navy to work for an American corporation and live on the island of Crete for 3 years, and of course traveled extensively in the Greek islands and the Greek mainland, and in the Middle East, and it was that common bond that brought us together, this common interest that we soon discovered that we had. And one thing led to another, and it was just a fun thing to do, and we've done it, and it was just it was the best summer of my life, if I could say that.
Well, that is a major statement. I want to say that. I was getting ready to say before you made that comment that your enthusiasm, all three of you, and your excitement is very contagious in relation to those kind of tours. I've had the opportunity twice to go to Europe with students in a class format and with credit, so forth, and that's the reason I want to ask this next question, because I know that the commercial tours that you often see advertised that are constantly going on are drastically different from an educational tour. And so my question would be, would you share with our viewers, I know in a minute we'll get into this particular tour, but what makes an educational tour so different from a commercial tour? Who wishes to fill that question?
Well, I'll just start because it's just so much different. I've traveled on commercial tours and I've traveled on business tours, and I find that the educational tour offered us one, the no-frills approach, and the opportunity to share so much with your colleagues, the travelers that you're with, and a real in-depth study of the culture and the people and the languages and the geography of the country. It's just an amazing opportunity that you don't get on a commercial tour. Before the 1990 tour to Greece, we studied for some 5 or 6 weeks together as a group, and having studied the culture and all of the individuals contributing to that, it just sets us up for an entirely different atmosphere before we left.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things we feel very strongly about is we don't particularly like tours where you lead everyone around by the nose and a few experts just talk at them nonstop. And so one of the things that we try and do right from the beginning is establish ourselves as a community of learners who each have plenty to contribute to the rest. And as Lloyd said, we meet in the classroom for several weeks before we even leave. Each person has a field that they agree to serve as our resource person on, both before we leave and on tour. And we just have a great time learning from each other as we go along without feeling like we're having to sit down and be so stuffy about it. So
also, when you return, a lot of times you get together too.
We do.
Following that,
Oh, yes.
Jim, would you like to add?
Well, I think they pretty well covered the territory, but I guess I just underscore again that it's primarily a tour that asks the people who participate to be responsible for some of their own learning and to involve themselves in that way. Often a commercial tour, you can sit there in the bus and watch the scenery go by and half listen to what's going on and really not be involved in any meaningful way. And I think our tour has built into it the opportunity for you to be involved in a meaningful way.
It seems to me that you get so much more closeness to the culture and to the people.
That's right.
And commercial tours oftentimes are just on buses and rushing through things and
Yeah.
seeing other tours.
Right, and I can just add that this tour, as opposed to some of the commercial tours that you see, doesn't necessarily hit all the high spots and the glitzy places. We do go off the beaten track, so to speak, and get into the outland where you can look at the artifacts of the country in a true sense rather than in a commercial sense.
I really
not just the artifacts either. The people who live there is one
yeah.
of our greatest interests. So we try and visit some small villages and things like that.
You
So
both have
things-
certainly built the bridge, and then with Jim's other comments, let's talk about Turkey and this particular tour again. It's going to be in the summer of 1994. We'll come back to some of those details near the end of the program. But we have two things that you have prepared that I'm very excited about, and I commend all of you for preparing so well for the program. I believe that Jim is going to lead us through a look at the map, and Lloyd, I think you're going to make some points. And if we could take a look at the map, I think that our viewers would be interested in the route that you're going to take, and there's just a visual aid of the map that's very, very helpful, and then we're going to follow that in a few minutes with some other things.
Okay, in a few minutes we'll give you a mini slide travelogue to make the map come alive a bit more, but here's a quick preview. We fly from Spokane to Istanbul via Copenhagen on SAS. There in Istanbul we catch a connecting flight to Dalaman, the major airport on the southwest coast. After our first night in nearby Fethiye, we drive through scenic Lycia to Patara, a nice little beach village with wonderful nearby ruins. Then we move on down the coast a bit further to seaside village of Kalkan, a special favorite of ours and our base for exploring even further south as far as Kekava Island. All of Lycia is a very beautiful and historic region that until recently was accessible only by boat or rough, snaky highway, so it's quite traditional and unspoiled. We head back north to Marmaris, a popular yachter's haven where we cross by ferry to the Greek island of Rhodos, or Rhodes. Quite an amazing place. We'll spend a couple of days exploring it, including a visit to scenic ancient Lindos and a tour around the island. Then we'll take a hydrofoil past Simi to the neighboring Greek island of Kos, where we'll see more famous classical and medieval ruins before our ferry back to Turkey. We re-enter at Bodrum, a memorable harbor to sail into, and after 2 days there, begin working our way to the heart of ancient Iona, where classical Greek culture really began. Didyma, home of Apollo's famous oracle, Miletus and Priene, where philosophy and science were both born. Kushadasi is our base for exploring Ephesus, the most famous archaeological site on the west coast.
Down there, yeah.
Then we'll drive north through olive groves around the Gulf of Edremite and over ancient Mount Ida to Assos, a highly picturesque little village on the coast. Next we head to ancient Troy, scene of the Trojan War and a place I never get tired of. Çanakkale sits at the most strategic point of the Dardanelles, one of the world's most famous straits, which will cross to the Gallipoli Peninsula, the very moving site of a major World War I offensive that changed history. Perhaps you've seen the excellent Australian film based on the story, starring Mel Gibson. Then we retrace our steps south to Bergama, ancient Pergamon, another very impressive ancient city, and back to Izmir, where we catch a comfortable overnight ferry to Istanbul. Believe me, the only way to enter this magnificent city is by ship. It's an amazing place, and our finale in Turkey. However, we get a nice bonus on the way home, an overnight in Copenhagen, one of Europe's most popular and appealing cities. And finally, we find ourselves back home in familiar Spokane.
What an excellent presentation, and it's certainly obvious that the three of you have thought through this very clearly in much detail, and I think the map was just tremendous help. We're now going to move to another visual aid. We're going to look at some video that you have prepared, and Judy Sildy is going to narrate this as we look at it. And at this time, I would ask our staff if they would run the video that we're showing about the tour to Turkey.
Do you picture Turkey as dry and brown? In fact, much of the southwest coast where our tour begins is green, pine-forested mountains. At Patara, just yards off this almost deserted beach, are lovely sand-drifted Roman ruins. Long ago, this region was Lycia, whose people left splendid tombs cut into the rock face. Everywhere are ancient cities, prehistoric, Greek, Roman. Some are well preserved, such as this theater at Xanthos. Others are picturesque ruins, like this shrine to the life-giving goddess we know today as Mother Nature. These ladies baking at the village oven wear typical bright harem pants, no black robes and veils for Turkish women. Transportation varies from sleek yachts, jets, and Mercedes to donkeys, horse carts, and the original Anatolian pickup truck. I love this ruined temple of Zeus, which stands in a quiet wood miles from anywhere. Women at their loom weave the carpets Turkey is so famous for. You'll often see even very young girls busy learning the patterns from mothers or sisters. Some of the coastline is rocky and indented by little coves with a crescent of sandy beach. Looks inviting at this time of year, doesn't it? We like to visit quiet villages few tours see. Here's a favorite on Kekova Island, crowned by a medieval castle and surrounded by sunken ancient cities visible beneath the clear blue waters. Some are even explorable by waders. This family prepares pita, which the Italians renamed pizza. Turkish food is great, and it's cheap, too. Now we cross to the Greek island of Rhodos, a strategic fortress in the Crusades. Much of Rhodestown is walled by medieval ramparts and moats. It's an amazing time capsule. This last summer, Rhodestown celebrated its 2400th anniversary. These kids in the parade are proud of their heritage, as are their older sisters and mothers. Talk about classic beauties. This shot of Lindos captures centuries. Beyond the busy beach is the village of old whitewashed homes, preserved by Greece as a cultural monument. Above it, a crusader fortress, and higher yet on the Acropolis, the Temple of Athena. No wonder Rhodes has been a tourist magnet for centuries. We sail back into Turkey at Bodrum. Despite its jet-set trendiness, it's still a pretty, laid-back harbor town guarded by another nifty crusader castle, this one housing a museum of underwater archaeology. Shopping beckons everywhere in Turkey. Colorful outdoor markets, exotic bazaars. The one in Istanbul is an incredible maze of 4,000 shops, and carpet merchants, endlessly resourceful at wangling you into their display rooms. The carpets and kilims vary from region to region, all gorgeous. No wonder they're a favorite souvenir. Here at ancient Ephesus, the richest Roman city in Asia, St. Paul got himself into hot water by preaching the new Christian faith. This villa in Ephesus, with its mosaic-filled breezeway around the garden courtyard, gives a glimpse of the city's grace and sophistication. Ah yes, we're awfully partial to Assos, a quiet, unspoiled seaside village where Aristotle once lived and taught when it was a Greek center of learning. For many, here's the big draw, ancient Troy, scene of Homer's epic war between the Greeks and Trojans. Today, archaeologists are digging here for the first time in 50 years. We sail at last into one of the world's great cities, Istanbul, Constantinople, Byzantium, bustling, exotic, echoing with history, eternal crossroads of East and West. Here are two of its grandest sights, the Blue Mosque, an Ottoman masterpiece, and beyond it the greatest building of the Roman Empire, Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, ethereal with glittering mosaics which convey a sense of timelessness. Finally, a shot I took in a village far from Istanbul. To me it captures the essence of Turkey and Greece today, the dignified country farmer living much as his ancestors, and on the wall behind him, the sign of changing times, disco. What better part of the world could we travel to get a sense of our own place in the endlessly flowing stream of time?
I just don't know when that I have had a program in which we've dealt with tours that has been so well put together and is so enticing, and I want to commend all of you for both the slides and the map and so forth. You truly have demonstrated how well organized you are on such a tour and how educational it is. I want to pack my bags today and leave today.
You'd be most welcome.
I saw Lloyd there as you were going through this, Judy, and I could just tell he was ready to leave today.
It's true.
We do have a little time, and I certainly am not going to let the program pass without letting people know about how to get in touch with them. We'll come back to that. But there's a lot of stereotyping all over the world, and this is certainly a place in the world that's happened. Turkey has received an unjustified negative image at times, and so I would like I'm going to start with Judy on this question, for you to talk a little bit about, obviously the slides have demonstrated the beauty of the area, but would you talk to our viewers about why the stereotypes are wrong, and particularly address some questions about the Islamic history and what people would learn through that process?
Okay, sure, I'd be happy to, because it's something I feel very strongly about. I think in this country, two things have worked to create some very negative and I think very tragic stereotypes about Turkey. One of them is the movie Midnight Express, which you may remember from years back, which is a sort of horrendous tale of an American who is imprisoned for drugs and really atrocious treatment. And I should say that that's a film that the Turks really regret and feel is a very unfair depiction of their own country. Quite opposite of the way the film portrays it, we find the Turkish people to be just unusually warm, hospitable, the nicest people you could possibly travel among. The other thing that I think is a real problem in our society as a whole is the way that Islam has been demonized so much by the popular press. I find, as a matter of fact, just this afternoon we were talking about it in my history classes, and I find that the stereotypes that students have and that adults have are almost universally negative. They imagine a land of terrorists, a land of oppressed women, you name it. We do not find that to be true of Islam in general, and certainly not of Turkey. And in my mind, one of the greatest values of this tour, although initially our interest was in presenting Turkey as the roots of Greek culture, and that will certainly be a major part of our focus, but I think one of the greatest things that it offers is a chance to see the human face of Turkey and of Islam, and I hope to re-examine some of those stereotypes which we just can't afford to have in this world today.
Jim, you too have this experience with Turkey. Now, could you add to what Judy said and inform our viewers about some of the highlights that you have experienced in the past with the people of Turkey?
Well, Tony, I must say that I went to Turkey with a good many stereotypes, and one of the things that surprised me is that I found that Turkey, first of all, is a secular country. It's not under Islamic rule. And I had been under the impression that it was Islamic all the way through, and that everyone was in government was Islamic, etc. At least they were practicing their theology in that way. So I was, having to divest all kinds of stereotypes as I went into the country. I found the people to be extremely friendly. I must say I traveled extensively in Greece before I ever ventured into Turkey. And I find the people in Turkey, it's not good to characterize people in this way, I guess, but the Greeks in some ways aren't as friendly as the Turks are. Maybe it's because they know they've been visited by so many people from the West for so long. I don't know. But there are many people that stop us in the street and talk to us. We had two young boys this past summer who were 12 years old who stopped us in the middle of this very religious city and talked to us at length about America and the United States, and had all kinds of questions about the things that young boys who are 12 years old would like to know. And a big crowd of people were following us around everywhere, and it was a very enjoyable experience. And actually the boys have written us a letter since we returned home, and that's just one of the real positive high notes of our last trip.
They call us our best Franz. And that's typical of the kind of Turkish hospitality. Muslims in general, of course, believe that any visitor is a guest sent by God, and that it is an obligation to be hospitable to visitors, but no place do you find a warmer welcome than you do in Turkey.
As you talk, I visualize a traveling classroom. That's what you really have. Lloyd, I'm just not going to let us get too close to the end because we could run out of time. I know that there are people who are interested in at least talking with you about this. I'd like for you to spend a few minutes to how they could contact you. I know you have a telephone number, and a little bit more about the structure of how they would sign up and the requirements.
Right. Well, I would point out that we have a telephone number, and if we have viewers that are interested in obtaining some more information, there's no way of a commitment, but I have an answering machine at home, and my number is on the monitor. It's area code 208-772-4158, and if I'm not there, please leave a message and we'll get back to you. And it's just of interest. If you're only passing interest or any partial interest or intend to travel with us, we'd certainly like to hear from them. And we can provide some written copies of the planned itinerary, and as the plans develop, and they're certainly not firm, and we want to point that out right now, but we're
I should
firming
interject
up.
that we're taping this program on November the 8th, and it's running in December. There'll be a lot more firmed up by the time it airs.
Oh, that's a good point. That's right. Yes, we will. And so we just look forward to having some folks contact us and giving us the opportunity to explain a little more in depth what we're doing, where we're going, and how it might go. And generally speaking, after the parties have made a commitment to come on the trip, we ask for a small down payment as a commitment, because we feel this tour is going to fill pretty rapidly because it's a popular.
Judy, I know that you have some date on this too, and that is Could you give us an idea of approximate cost? I know that you have to firm up some other
Yeah.
things.
We're not sure. We're still in the process of getting final figures, but our cost will be somewhere between $1,800 and $2,000 for 19 days of travel. That includes airfare from home, some but not all meals, and our overnight in Copenhagen on the way home, etc. So it's a very competitive price. Very
And also,
competitive.
some people may be interested in, how large is the group? So
Yeah, I wanted to add that.
point.
I wanted
That's a
to
good
add that
point.
to what Lloyd said. We try and keep it small, about 30 to 35 people with 3 of us leaders, so that we have a lot of opportunity for good interaction. And in particular, I wanted to mention that it's one of the greatest pleasures of our last tour was the mix of people. We had NIC students, we had NIC faculty, we had community people ranging from active retirees to folks in their 20s, etc. And it was just a delightful mixture of friendly, familiar faces and new faces, and we expect that this will be much the same based on the inquiries we're already getting.
Now, there's also something else here is that it is not sponsored by any particular college, but it's in cooperation
That's right.
with
We're working in cooperation with both Lewis Clark State College, which will be the primary credit granting institution, or for those who are interested in lower division credit, through NIC, our own employer. Jim and I are the teachers of record, and we are teaching for both NIC and LCSC in this case. So it truly is a cooperative venture in that way, too.
Jim, you wanted to add?
I just wanted to add that one point to this, and that's that the price, I think, is very good, and I think most of the viewers will note that. I'd like to make sure that they understand, too, though, that this tour is not a first-class tour. We're not staying in the Hilton, and we wouldn't want to stay there anyway, because we want to be close to the people. But we will give good quality here, but we also want people to understand that we're not operating here in a commercial capacity in that way either. We're
We
not
call
going to
it
be insulated.
High adventure, low budget.
That's right.
What a good slogan. Also, again, there are people who want credit, and you've indicated that lower division, North Idaho College, and upper division, Lewis Clark State College, but how many credits would be available total?
3 to 4, depending on what people want to do. 2 of them are taken before we leave for the classroom. We'll have 7 evening meetings on Wednesday nights beginning in February, and then an additional 1 to 2 credits, which are given for the tour itself and for some wrap-up work afterwards, depending on people's interest.
And if for some reason they miss the telephone or whatever, they can also contact you at North Idaho College, which is 1000 West Garden Avenue in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, 83814. I've been given the signal that we're just about out of time, and I would like to say to Jim McLeod and Judy Sildy and Lloyd Marsh that it's been such a fun program for me and such a pleasure. And you've worked a lot to put this together, not only for this program, but obviously you're well prepared, and we wish you well and congratulate you for leading yet another tour. And I've talked with you about other tours, and there's a kind of learning experience goes on in travel that's very unique and different from that in the classroom on a particular campus. So I'm sure that your class will go, and that a lot of people will be responding. On behalf of our staff, I want to thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been giving you the pre-tour of Turkey and parts of Greece that will take place in summer 1994. Thank you for being with us, and I'd like to invite you to be with us again next week at the same time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Telemedia Services on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.